you won't have that same liability on your book because those jobs will be completed. And you will have been able to realize those earnings.
Okay, so going back to the question, and we're going to be very specific now. Which income statement account would have the greatest impact on debt?
The marketing and reservation system.
All right. Why?
Because the increase in that account, which would mean that the liability is being reduced.
Thank you. We're moving on. Everybody get that?
Say that again?
Go ahead.
The increase in the account would mean the liability will be reduced by 8%.
Okay, that makes sense.
Now, do you understand how you're approaching these questions? And you realize that the data that you're given, so you're not making a generalized theoretical argument. You're looking at the specifics of the case and you're answering it in that vein, right?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that one more time? It was because of the increase in the account is what?
The increase in the marketing account will reduce total liability because it's not going to be deferred revenue anymore. So the liability is going to be reduced.
Okay.
All right, we're going on to the balance sheet question. All right. First question says, what portion of assets are financed with debt, and what portion with equity? And what difference does it make? And does it matter that liabilities are higher than assets and equity is negative? So, and she might denote to me that these are somewhat qualitative. We tend to do more quantitative questions, but this one happens to be a little bit qualitative, and it's fine as long as you understand what you're talking about, right? So, where does our assets and our equity and our liability, what statement are we looking for here to get this information? I should have gotten a quick response already from somebody.
Liability.
So which statement though? Which statement? The question is, which statement should I be looking at for question one?
Balance
sheet.
Balance sheet, thank you. All right, so remember the question now. The first part of the question is, what portion of assets are financed with debt and with equity? I'm going to write something. I want you to bear this in mind at all times, that there is an equation which we call the fundamental accounting equation. It is assets equal liabilities plus equity. Okay? And an extension of this could also be, meaning it means the same thing, it's just an extended view. Assets equal liabilities plus equity plus revenue minus expense. This is what we call, again, an extended view of the fundamental accounting equation. What this says is that assets are essentially financed by liabilities plus equity. So if I buy, using this scenario, if I buy a truck for $50,000 and I pay down 10% and finance the rest, okay? Let's come over here a little bit. Scenario, purchase truck $50,000. And this is how I'm going to finance the purchase. Down payment, 10%. Finance balance. Now, if I'm recording it in terms of assets, liability, and equity, how would I answer that question? What would I have down as assets?
50,000.
50. How is it financed? Huh?
The $4,500 is financed. 45,000.
And naturally, equity would be 5,000, right? So if the question is, how am I financing this? How am I essentially paying for this truck? You would tell me that I am using 45,000 in liabilities, or if I'm financing it for 45,000 and I am paying down, presumably out of cash, another 5,000. That's a very simple example, right? Is everybody following that so much? And that's because we're using this formula. And again, if we have a scenario that includes revenue and expense, we use this formula. Because, in effect, revenue and expense, when it is closed out each year, rolls into equity. Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
So in effect, we have something like this: assets equal liabilities plus equity plus the net of revenue and expense, which is net income. When net income comes in, it comes in looking like this. It comes in as assets, so we can rewrite this further to look like this: assets equals liability plus equity. A component of equity is retained earnings. And retained earnings is the account that captures, we'll say captures, net income or loss. So that's how it, so the earnings from the operations increases your equity. If you lose money, if you're having a net loss, it reduces equity. That's how it impacts this equation and how it impacts the balance sheet over time. All right, now we'll go back to the question. Question says, what portion of assets? So basically, it's asking you to go take a look at your assets. And for that matter, we'll just look at the most recent quarter. And we see that total assets is 961 million. And the way we should be reading this is we have total liabilities of 1.2 billion, and we have a negative equity position. So, you want to do the equation here? You guys help me. Let me find a space here. Let's just increase some space here. And we're going to lay this out in terms of the fundamental accounting equation. Okay, do you want to let me do that? So we'll just shift it down like that. Okay. So again, what we're talking about is, let's go over here and do it here. Assets financed by liabilities and equity. Please get used to this relationship because we're going to see this a lot, especially when we go into the next project. So, if we're talking about, is it quarter 3? third quarter 2017. All right, let's do Q3 2017. How much is the asset?
$961 million.
Say it again. Give me the exact number.
961,192.
And how much is the liability? It's sort of there. 1161, right? 572. And how much is equity? Come on, guys, you're looking at it.
250.
Huh?
Negative 200,000.
Thank you.
280.
All right, so let's prove it, right? So if we add these two numbers together, right? Do you see that it equals 961,192? Tell me if you agree or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So the equation holds, right? I told you earlier that assets all the while, every single time, should equal, essentially should equal liability plus equity. So I don't have to rewrite that. Now the question, so clearly, this is the way you would translate that. The assets are financed by the liabilities in this proportion, equity in those proportions. Except you have a strange scenario. You have a scenario where liabilities are even greater than the assets and the equity is negative. So how do you answer that? If this were, just while you're thinking about it, if this were 100,000, and this were 60,000, and this were 40,000, how would you answer this?
Now you make a profit of $40,000.
Say it, repeat.
An equity of $40,000 from this investment. I don't want to say investment, but you made $40,000, or you owe. I don't really know how to say it, but I know what it is.
Right.
That you.
No, but that's the point. I want you to be able to say it, because if you can say this scenario, then you can say this scenario, right? So how do you read?
Assets are financed 60% through liabilities, 40% through equity.
Let's put some names to it so that we make sense of it. I go in the store and I purchase heavy, not in the store, but I go to a leasing company and I purchase heavy equipment. Heavy equipment for 100,000. Then tell me how that reads.
You financed 60% of that through some sort of debt,
All right. And
whether it was accounts payable or.
Is it that you complete a 40,000 down payment and the rest was finance?
Yeah, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So basically, what you're saying here is that out of the resources of the company, I paid $40,000, presumably cash. So out of the resources of the company, I pay 40% of the cost of this equipment. and I finance the balance for $60,000, probably a long-term debt over 5 years. So again, the question I might ask you, again, if you think about the question, is I bought heavy equipment for $100,000. How did I pay for it? That's really the question. And you will tell me I paid for it by putting down $40,000 and financing the balance. Do you see that? It's relatively simple, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Now, if you go into this scenario and you say that I have assets of 961 and I'm financing it by more than what the liabilities, at least I'm financing it by a greater amount, which is 1.2 billion, and I'm somehow coming up with a negative equity position here. How do you reason that? So this is not your typical situation, but this just so happened in this company situation. So a couple of things, because it's unusual in nature, it can happen mathematically, and it did happen in this case, but because this is so unusual, one of the first things you want to do is understand this behavior, right? 100,000 is financed by so much in liability and so much out of the company's resources. This is how you paid for it. The same should hold true here. So because this is unusual, I would go to the narrative and I would look very closely to see why we're spending so much, we're borrowing so much money to pay for these assets. And by the way, we have no money in equity. It's taking us into a negative equity position. What does a negative equity look like in your mind? How do you reason negative equity?
A lot.
How do you reason it? How do you explain? How do you get to negative equity?
You owe more than,
When the item is, you owe more than it's worth.
yeah.
All right, let me give you a practical
It
example.
has to do with the stocks of the company. So if you have to pay for the stocks.
It can be about the stocks of the company.
What about the
So
interest?
if I pay out the stocks, then it means that I'm taking cash from the company to pay out that.
Well, it's not that you've paid out the stocks per se.
Isn't it interest? Has to do with the interest?
Interest wouldn't fall here. Interest in of itself would be an expense. It's cost of doing business. But if you think equity as you think stock, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then what has happened to the stock here that would cause you to go into a negative position?
That it went down?
The stock price probably went down. So let me give you a point of association. Let's say you bought a home and the home was worth $300,000. Scenario. The home was worth $300,000, right? This is probably more than 300. All right. You guys can see my screen, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
House is worth $300,000. And we put a 10% down, which is 30,000. Agree?
Yes.
And that left 270. So this is the mortgage. Let's say the house price remains the same, but we go in and, we get these brokers come to you all the time and they're like, well, why don't you, the housing market is growing, it's doing very well. Why don't you take out an equity line of credit? Because you've got equity. Right now we got equity of how much? 30,000, right?
Right.
Okay, well, let's say we took out $50,000 in equity, or $50,000 equity line of credit. Or better yet, let's not do that. Let's say we took out $30,000. We take out the entire equity. So now our equation works like this, does it not? Because the equation has to hold.
Right.
However, we have $300,000 in, so this house is entirely financed by debt, agreed?
Agreed.
By the way, you will notice a term I want you to get familiar with, and this is a term, leverage. When we use the term leverage in finance, it means debt. So I would say that this house is completely levered. You'll get used to that soon enough, but I want to introduce the term. So we say that you are highly leveraged, or we could say that this is highly levered for that matter. That means your entire asset is financed by an outside source. But here's something that happens along the way. So now you have, so the same 300,000 scenario, okay? Oops. For some reason, the market starts to fall and the house price went down to 250. The equation has to hold. What just happened?
Negative equity.
Negative equity. Do we see what's happened?
Yep.
Because here you've locked yourself into much higher debt, but the value of your asset went down. Think with me up here. You've locked yourself in higher debt. That's not going to change. The bank is not going to fluctuate the debt simply because you've lost value in your assets. How do you typically lose value in your assets?
Depreciation.
Depreciation, thank you. And so now because this is a residual calculation in that 3 equals 2 and 1, so to speak. If this number, so essentially, let's do it this way. I'll just show it to you mathematically. So if this number goes to 2, that's going to force this number into negative position. Can you reason it from that point? Can you look for the pieces in the layout of your balance sheet to understand this relationship? Yes? Good people? Yes?
It's harder when the numbers are different that way. So essentially, are you saying that?
But you know what happened here. You know what happened
Right.
here, right?
Uh-huh.
You understand what's happened here.
Yes.
So, and you understand that you're locked into a higher debt amount at some point when you had sufficient asset to back it.
Mm-hmm.
But you know that the debt isn't going to fluctuate, but the asset value is likely to go down because of depreciation, because of damage, because of fire, because of water, because of anything that caused the value to go down.
Okay.
And
So
you
you
know the
wouldn't-
moment
you
it
wouldn't
goes
necessarily
down and your debt follow, you're going to be in a negative equity position.
Right.
So the question you should then be thinking about is what's causing this downward movement in your asset value? And that's where your explanation is going to come from, because that's what's causing you to be in a negative equity position. Going back to the question. So what portion of your assets are financed with debt and equity? You now know the pieces, right? But now you have to explain what's happened to cause that. And does that make a difference? Is it significant? Is it important to know, to note? So that's where your discussion is going to come from now. Does it matter that liabilities are higher than assets and the equity is negative? Does that matter? Yes or no?
Yes.
Why does it matter? Because that's what you're going to answer. What does it mean for that matter, and why does it matter?
Well, it means that you owe more than what your company is worth.
True.
And it matters because when you want to borrow money from a lender or shareholders want to purchase stock, they'll see that and they'll buy it lower shares than what you say it's worth.
Absolutely. It puts you in a very unhealthy position, or you could almost say weak position. You don't have much bargaining power because you're already, we say that you are now insolvent. So these are the ideas that would come into this question. Okay, we're good?
Yeah.
All right, so number 2 says, based on your estimation, do we have enough cash and cash equivalent to pay off our current liabilities? Now, some of the responses that I've seen come in so far, you guys are answering this question taking total assets. So here again, go to the balance sheet. The data is there. Here is the cash and cash equivalent line. Do you see that? Here is the current liabilities line. How much is cash and cash equivalent?
230.
Cash and cash equivalent.
Mm-hmm.
How much is it?
238,830.
How much is current liabilities?
273,034.
Do you have enough money?
No.
Okay, so that's a clear way to answer that, right? Because what I see some folks are doing, they were going to total current assets. They were taking this 961. Sorry, not the 961, but they were going to this 455. And I'm saying, wow, but the question spells out what you're looking at. Why are you using 455? Nonetheless.
I do have one question.
Go ahead.
So I answered this in 2 parts because it didn't really specifically ask. Do we need to be answering it in terms of the 10K or the 10Q?
That's how I answered it too. I answered it from the 10K.
And that's fine. That's fine. But tell me how you're answering it, by the way. So if you're referencing, because the data is in 2 places. This is the annual data on the 10K, and this is the quarterly data. So
Right.
you could answer it from either balance sheets, right? But
Right.
just reference which one you're answering it from, and I'm okay with it.
Okay, great. All right.
So again, you can easily answer if you have enough cash. And then the question says, would you advise eliminating the loyalty program, or is it better to keep some liabilities? And then it goes on, if we have more than enough cash and cash equivalent, what percentage of long-term debt, if any, can we pay? So that has some qualitative aspects to your response. I think you should be able to answer those once you can identify the pieces, correct?
Yeah.
Everybody okay with that? Because you know what the pieces are now, so this is more qualitative in nature. You don't have more than enough cash and cash equivalent, but the question is more prospective in nature. If you did have more than enough, how much more, what percentage of long-term debt would you pay, and can you pay?
Oh, I thought the question was asking, like the first part is, do you have enough? And then if you didn't have enough, then you don't answer that question. But it's a more hypothetical question on if you did have enough.
Tell me the first name of the person who said that, because it's on your phone number showing.
Oh, Lord Jetta.
Okay, so you're rewriting my question. Are you not?
I mean, and that's how I took the question, so I didn't answer that part of it, because I'm like, well, you don't have enough, so I can't answer your question. I thought it was saying, like, if there is enough in your answer, then tell me the percent.
But you know you can, right? Because
You can't what?
my question is actually leading. Because it says, if you did. You agree?
No, it's if
I mean, now that you say it, but when I read it alone, I didn't think so.
Okay. Yeah, I tell you, this is one of the reasons why I'm trying to do this with you today.
Yes.
Because I realize
Yes.
some of the question might cause you to provide a response that's not what the question is asking for. So a big part of this is really understanding what the question is requiring you to do. All right, we're going to move on. We're kind of running against time a little bit, so we're going to speed up a little bit, okay? Next one says, which balance sheet accounts, 1 second here. We got a small problem. Let me, 1 second. I just realized something. I was in the wrong workbook. Oh, there you go.
Well, so while you're pulling that up, Professor, I have a question for you about the loyalty program.
Uh-huh.
Are we supposed to be looking at this from a financial perspective of you're spending more money than you have? Of course you shouldn't be spending money when you don't have to. Or do we need to look at it from a long-term business standpoint of, well, if you get rid of this program that invites users to come back over and over again, you may affect their willingness to come back to your business in the future?
I'm sorry. Repeat that back for me. Are you? By the way, can you guys see my screen?
No.
All right.
No?
Oh, 1 second. Let me go back and see if I can share the screen again. Okay. Are you able to now?
Yeah, but not the worksheet.
What I'm seeing at the moment is your web browser.
All right.
I think you have it open, the third workbook over. It's,
Yeah, I do see where it's telling me it's paused, but okay, we're gonna get it right in a few minutes here. Too many things open, that's part of the problem. Let me close some of them. Go ahead with the question again, just the same, while I'm trying to get to the right place.
So my question is, for basically the balance sheet question number 2, when it asks specifically about eliminating the loyalty program, when we're evaluating it the numbers wise, right? It obviously makes no sense to incur additional liability when you don't have enough revenue to offset that. But are we supposed to be looking at this from just the raw numbers perspective, or because I feel like there's missing data? How how much does the loyalty system cause people to come back and use their services again? Right? Like if you eliminated this, would you potentially reduce your number of repeat customers?
But could you also say it is the royalty fee? I mean, the royalty program is essentially the brand, right? Isn't that something that's part of this business, which if you get rid of it, then what do you have? Then you won't have a brand, you won't have a program, essentially.
Well, obviously, you would also look at what the proportionate share of revenue is driven by the loyalty program. And you're absolutely right. You have to understand how the loyalty programs factor in your overall business and whether it is central to your business. And if you get rid of it, what does that mean for your business? You might save on some expense, but could you impact the other revenue areas? I don't know if that's actually answering your question or not.
I think my problem is that this question feels like the only one that actually isn't answered by the 10Q or 10K.
Right, because it has it's qualitative. It has some qualitative aspects to it. But you still have to understand what is happening in the data set and what is happening with the loyalty program to be able to answer that. Okay, I'm trying to hurry up and figure out what's causing my screen not to show up, so I can get there where you guys are. We were doing well for a minute there. All right, let me close all of these worksheets. Okay, I'm gonna open again. Okay. Are you guys seeing my screen now?
Yes. But not the balance sheet. We're on, yeah, keep going over.
All right, it's balance sheet.
Yep.
Okay. So going back to the loyalty program question. Would you advise eliminating the loyalty program so that we keep some liabilities? Tell me what you know of the loyalty program at this point. Hello?
So I looked up their loyalty program, and what it is it'll like offer the customers one free stay at a hotel when they book, or if they book during the week, they could save like a day in their like total booking. So to me, I think you should keep the loyalty program because it's going to continue to bring customers to your site, to your hotel, in order to bring a revenue.
Do you also know what keeping the loyalty program, how it impacts the books, or if getting rid of it, how it also impacts the books?
And then too, the royalty program is like inherent in the marketing and reservation revenues too. So there's a relationship there, right?
Mm-hmm. Do you know what that relationship is, or are you able to see that information in the narrative?
For revenue.
You're saying revenue. You're saying it stimulates revenue?
That was more of a question, Dr. Crosdell. Would that be deferred revenue?
Yeah, that's what I wrote that. Yeah, I wrote deferred revenue too.
Right, but how? I'm hearing you, but how does it, in other words, if you remove this item, as the question is asking, if you remove the loyalty program, you stop giving away these free beds or free day stay, if you stop doing it, what would it do to your overall effectiveness of your business? And you notice the question sort of implies that there are some associated liabilities.
Right.
Which is to say that keep having the loyalty program generate some liabilities. So, all right, it's like saying, okay, how are we thinking about liabilities here? We have a loyalty program, and if a customer stays X number of days, we're going to owe them. Owe them implies liability, right?
Right.
We're going to owe them, let's say, 3 free days to stay at our hotel.
Right.
So for every time they spend X amount of dollars, let's say they spend a week with us, we give them 3 free days. Is that spend a week with us money? Does that make sense relative to the 3 free days that we owe them? Is that helping us or hurting us? The question is not theoretical. So you need to go look at the numbers and see if that type of program is helping us or hurting us.
So could you think about it like it's intended to, like, you know, increase your membership and increase, so in increasing your membership, you're going to have some liability, like you said, but at the same token, you can also increase like the average daily rates for those memberships over time. Is it sort of like that?
Well, it's unfortunately it's not so much a membership. It's not that they're paying a fee.
No, I know. But the sort of membership into the brand is how I'm thinking about it. Like, you know, so they're benefiting and they're benefiting from having the loyalty program and being a part of this brand.
I agree, except you're not answering it in general terms.
Okay.
You're answering it in specific terms. In other words, you should be able to tell me that if you remove the loyalty program, revenue is going to drop by X amount of dollars. And that's because you've figured out the cause and effect relationships in the numbers. You should know that the loyalty program is impacting revenue by a certain number. You should also know that in association with that, it generates so much of a liability. So if, for example, I should know at the end of this conversation or this